CityCast from Explocity.
I was once asked to cook Indian in Paris and concocted something which looked like koftas in a masala gravy, or what my mother called ball curry. I had found the famous Kashmiri masala in a grubby Indian grocer near Saint Denis. It met with great applause. I became a pretty good cook, churning out a handful of Indian dishes. But my culinary education was from the French School of Gastronomy. I learnt the meaning of the word quality, how to shop, where to shop, how to avoid supermarkets like the plague, how to pick a perfect brie, which dressing went with which salad, and why and how to handle a leg of lamb. I learned which cut of meat to use for each dish and why the age of the animal was so important to cooking. I was taught well and I was eager and willing student. When I returned to university in England, the country had become much more cosmopolitan and wiser in the matters of food. The British began drinking wine like they were born to it and eating quiche like it was their national dish. I approached all this trendy hype with my nose firmly in the air. I was beyond all the fluff. I had lived in Paris, nothing could beat that. It was decided by majority vote one day that each one in our flat on campus would cook for the rest of us once a week. I looked through all the fancy recipes I'd accumulated and painstakingly written down only to be told that the rest of them wanted me to make a curry. A curry, I thought in disgust. Me make a curry? I was appalled. My protest fell on deaf ears. Apparently coq au vin was too elitist. Curry was fine for the proletariat. Instead of calling mother and asking for help, I rushed out and bought a book by a lady called Madhu Jaffrey. Her recipes were amazingly accurate and brought Indian cooking out of the restaurant and into the kitchen. She also gave you very convenient alternatives if you didn't have the authentic ingredients. This little paperback became my Bible for the next 4 years. To everyone's amazement and mine, I turned out fabulous koftas, parathas and Bengal ka bhartas. I learned to follow flavors and not just instructions. From then on, there was no looking back. I became a fiend with a frying pan.
There's something primal about watching food shows on TV or anywhere for that matter, even in restaurants that have a glass pane through which you can watch the chefs in the kitchen doing their thing. It engages your attention while they ham it up. No, that's not a pun. The business of someone setting about chopping ingredients and turning them into masterful creations of tasty art, subliminal and soul-stirring to watch while you're sitting on the couch eating instant noodles, unmindful of the irony. I have no better example of this than when my partner and I one year decided that we'd buy the kids in our apartment building a ton of firecrackers for Deepavali. They had great fun on the street. Suddenly at 8 p.m., complete silence. They were gone. Bags of fireworks lay unattended on the sidewalk, the starter candles drooping and listing to one side. And where had all these pre-teen children gone? To watch Masterchef on TV. For many of us, watching cooking shows or reading about food is a form of escapism. It transports us to far-off lands and exotic cuisines, allowing us to experience new flavors and dishes without leaving home. But there's more to our love of food literature than just the escapism that it provides. Food brings people together. Reading about it gives us a sense of connection. Sharing a meal is a fundamentally human experience. And reading about food allows us to share in that experience, even vicariously. By reading about the foods of different regions and countries, we gain insights into their customs, their cultures, their traditions. There's so much history and indeed social anthropology there. On this podcast, after months of guests who are authors having written about the ravages of war or politics and poetry's melancholic joy, today I feel as happy as a predictable late-night TV talk show host who is about to cook Christmas turkey with Martha Stewart. Except that my guest today is closer to Julia Child, the original and famous author of cookbooks and host of TV shows in the US. You might remember that Meryl Streep played Julia Child in the movie Julie and Julia. My guest is Karen Anand, one of India's best-known food personalities. She is author of some 30 books and has been a host of many TV shows since the mid-1980s. Since then, Karen has brought class to the industry in India. She is widely respected, and to my knowledge, chefs of all persuasions court her opinion and her approval. Her most recent book is intriguingly titled Masala Memsahib, and it's a wonderful journey through giving us a window into food across India. It has stories and pictures and recipes, tons of recipes. Her expertise is honed from years of practice, and I am eager to talk to her about her book and about her life. So here she is, joining me from her home on a Sunday morning. Karen Anand, welcome to the Literary City.
Thank you so much, Ramji.
Who do you identify with more, Julia Child from her TV shows or Meryl Streep playing Julia Child?
Oh, that's a fun question. Julia Child, as you know, was so influenced by Paris, and so was I. So I would have to say Julia Child, although the things I've seen of her on her early TV appearances are a little bit over the top. I don't think I have that high-pitched voice. So I'll probably have to go with Meryl Streep.
I wouldn't have guessed. Meryl Streep will be pleased, I guess.
Yes. Well, we both won the same award.
Which?
There was an award called the French Food and Wine Award. It was called for l'esprit alimentaire.
Yeah.
And I won it in 2006 from the French government.
Mm-hmm.
And oddly enough, Meryl Streep won it. I think just after for her portrayal of Julia Child. So we have something in common.
Now, how fascinating is that? A food award for portraying a food personality.
I think after that, probably the tickets to flights to Paris from America probably got sold out.
I dare say. And there, inevitably, is the cherche la femme. And comparison with Martha Stewart has been hurled at you, surely.
It has, yeah.
But to persist, there's more Julia Child in you than Martha Stewart, isn't there?
Yes, and I think Martha Stewart is a different kind of person. I think Julia Child discovered everything in Paris, as I did. Mm-hmm. She was a bit older. She was married to a diplomat and
spy.
But she just sorry.
He was a spy.
Well, was he?
Yes, CIA spoof.
Yes. Oh, great. Well, it was played very well in the film. I love that chap.
So was she. They met in the OSS, the forerunner of the CIA.
Oh, I should have been a spy, actually. I think I would have been a good spy.
I'm sure.
But I had a nice cover as a cook. But I think she approached Paris with the same excitement. That scene where she goes into a restaurant and she has a sole meunière.
Right.
And she says, the butter, everything's about the butter. And I approached Paris when I was 18 with the same excitement and enthusiasm and bewilderment. Although I only came from across the channel, I was brought up in the UK. So, but it was still so different from English food, so different from Indian food, so different from what I'd known. So I think that similarity is definitely there. Martha Stewart, I think, is more. Nothing against her. She's built a fantastic empire, but I think she's more of a kind of pragmatist, opportunist, businesswoman. She saw an opportunity and she took it and has made an empire out of it. I certainly haven't made an empire, and I don't think Julia did.
Martha Stewart seems smarter than everyone else.
I think so. She's a smart woman.
You grew up in England. You hilariously say that you partied at the Sorbonne. You trained as a French chef. And in your career, you are most identified by your work on Indian cuisine. What caused the shift?
Look, when you're 18, you're like a sponge, right? So everything is exciting, especially when you go to France. I mean, I'd gone to France before, but Paris was a different ballgame. When I look back now, when people ask me, when were you first interested in food? I always used to say, oh, Paris, of course. But I realized it actually came from a lot earlier. I think my interest was a lot earlier. And of course, we're Indian. We love big flavors. My mother never used to cook, as I mentioned in the book. She hated the idea of cooking. It was a sort of slave thing when she came to England that she had to cook. But she laid a fantastic table. And she knew how to put things together in her own little style, But there was always nice napkins and there was nice crockery. And she did a good job of the limited means, in a way, available to her. Because nobody, unless you were sort of aristocracy in the UK, nobody really entertained in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And I would say it was only till the late 80s, 90s that people got quite European in the UK. So I think the Indian food background was always there. I had grandmothers who cooked. I had trips to India, which excited me. But I think what happened is in Paris, when I was cooking all this lovely French food that I learned, people would say, but you're Indian. Why don't you cook something Indian? And then I was a bit stuck. So as I've mentioned in that first paragraph that I read, so I Madhu Jaffrey came to the rescue. But I had a reference point. My mother did cook something, even though it may not be authentic. And we did go to Indian restaurants. And after the age of 16, I did go back to India and I had some idea of flavors. So I had I had reference points of what I was cooking in Paris. I only cooked 6 Indian things, but those 6 Indian things I kind of knew. And people loved them. And then when I got back to the UK, as I said, people said in my dormitory, in my flat, oh, you cook Indian, So I started cooking Indian, and that became, French food was always fashionable, but that started re-emerging, my interest in Indian food.
An interest and a career in Indian food.
Well, a career in both, because when I first came back to India, I did European food because that's what I missed.
You started the first salad bar, didn't you?
Yeah, that was completely European food.
Yes, it was.
That was in 89. And I started that in Bombay, and it was hugely successful. It was, a fantastic location. My partner was already very successful in a Chinese restaurant.
I've been there.
Yeah, at the salad bar?
Yes, in Bombay.
And so I was there for about a year, and then it became too much to go back and forth to Pune, and from Pune and Bombay, my children were little, and I gave it up because it was really
what a pity.
It was really very, very taxing for me to do this with 2 children. And I opened a cheese shop and a delicatessen, and that continued because that I could kind of do going up and down from Pune to Bombay. So it was all European food at the beginning, but when I got into television in the 90s, in the early mid-90s, then I started looking at more Indian food. But there were so many people out there doing Indian food. So I couldn't really find a niche, but I collected information. One of my first books, which was called Lean Cuisine Curries, was all about my rediscovery of Indian food when I came back to India and how to make it lighter.
I think that was your niche, wasn't it? A different perspective, a different voice.
Yes.
And in your writing, there's always that perspective is a sense of history. And speaking of the history of Indian food, what exactly is Indian food?
Unfortunately, so I think we should call it South Asian cuisine, really, because I think, we were a big country. So Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, I think was one, really. Unfortunately, we've had these borders. It's like saying European cuisine. There's no European cuisine, is there?
No.
So I think it's a very false sort of chapa that we've done Indian cuisine. So I really think Indian should be divided up into regions. But unfortunately, we've got the label already,
Yeah, completely. When I was doing my research for this podcast to interview you, that is, I tried to find a definition for Indian food and simply couldn't. Although I did discover that everything that we label as Indian food has had influences from the Middle East through various cultural and military routes. And everything that we know as Thai food or Pan-Asian has had influences from India through the Cholas, for instance.
Absolutely.
So we have received influences, and then we have influenced other cuisines, and often we have passed on the influences that we have received.
Yeah. And also we've had royalty. We've had, so wherever there has been, like France, then you have two types of cuisine. And then somehow in the middle, it's like couture and prêt in fashion. Somewhere in the middle, you get this nice mix of some interesting dishes that are where the skill set is very high, and some, home dishes. And we have that in India. We have that complexity. But yeah, when you go to England and you say, this is an Indian restaurant, it more or less means North Indian. Unless they specify that this is Northeastern or this is, South Indian.
Well, it might start to happen, I suppose. Let me ask you this question. When we talk about cuisine, we really are talking about the process of cooking rather than the finished product itself, aren't we?
Yeah, I'd have to think about that one. It's both, I think. It's a skill set, it's the ingredients, it's the product, it's the produce. For example, in Italy, the produce is superlative, or certainly used to be. Now, of course, supermarkets are taking over.
Big business.
When I first went to Italy, first went to Italy maybe 20, 25 years ago, I used to buy everything out of a little market. Mm-hmm. And people used to have, like Indian markets, people used to get things from their little holdings, their little farms.
Yes.
Now those markets have more or less become repositories of local, but they're not local food. So you'll find clothes. You'll find, other things there. A lot of clothes, actually. You'll find, if they're in Venice, you'll find touristy things. So they're not, but they have some food, but not a lot.
Right. But I did find that turmeric, cardamom, pepper, and mustard were harvested in India in 3500 BC.
Yes.
That's the Harappan civilization. Yesterday, I came upon this wonderful book. It's called The History of Our Food by K.T. Acharya. Read the whole thing last night. Great information.
Yes.
Do you know it?
Oh, he's a little Bible I have. Yeah, I've had him for a long time.
I found it to be a great book.
Yeah, he's very good.
Your book has some pretty interesting history too. For example, all that stuff about mangoes.
I mean, it's fascinating. I know other writers have done work on it, but about the mango, about, Apus or Alfonso. And it's nothing to do with Alphonse de Albuquerque, who was the first governor of Goa. It's actually to do with a botanist, a Jesuit priest who was a botanist. And he actually labeled and classified all these mangoes in Goa. And those classifications are still there in India. And then I think it went up to the Mughals, because the Mughals love fruit, and they started putting fruit, mango orchards. So the mango actually came from that area of Goa and the coast. And then once they started defining seeds and botany and all of that, then the Mughals took them up. I can't remember which Mughal empire it was then, but 15th, early 16th century. And started planting orchards. So the Dasera, the Daseri, the Langda, all had roots in these first mango saplings.
Fascinating. And you specifically mentioned Humayun, Akbar, and the timelines fit.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of history to show how the food in the north of India has been influenced by the whole Turkic-Indic corridor, if you like. But no matter how hard I search, I wasn't able to find much history about South Indian food. We don't know much, do we?
No.
And why not?
Well, that's what I said in the Bangalore Lit Fest. You see, the Mughals were very good at getting things written down by travelers or writing themselves. So there's a lot about their own food, about the influence from Persia, about the influence from, the Stans, the Uzbekistans, because they all came from there originally, the Turks. So they wrote everything down.
You expressed this very nicely in a magazine article that you wrote, and I quote, The thread that links food across boundaries is often easier explained than you think. Nice.
Thank you.
It was about Uzbekistan.
Uzbek, yes. Because there's so many things that are similar with our culture, and there's so many things that are very different.
There's a whole travel and food overlap in your personal Venn diagrams.
Yeah.
So in your travels, what other interesting stuff have you discovered?
I think Italians are very much like Indians.
Are they?
All the men love their mummies, mother fixation. They bargain. They love to bargain. They feel there's nothing wrong with asking for a discount or talking about cash.
Right.
The English would never do that.
No.
And I think in some ways our food is kind of similar. They love pepper, by the way. It was called, I think it was called Gold of the East or whatever. And the Venetians traded pepper for gold.
Yes, that's right.
So and there is pepper in all their food. Even Northern Italians, who are a little bit conservative about even using garlic, because garlic is considered a bit, it's a bit Southern Italian. It's a bit, but pepper is considered very refined.
In 2015, the Washington Post wrote a piece titled, "Scientists have figured out what makes Indian food so delicious." And the point that they make is that the Indians, we do something radical with flavors, something very different from what we, that's Americans, tend to do in the United States and the rest of Western culture. And it does it, that's Indians, at the molecular level. In your book, and I quote, "I applied all the principles of the great cooking and sourcing that I learned in France and found that they had been doing the same thing in India and for probably much longer."
Yeah.
So putting both together, what's molecular gastronomy and why are we doing this in India?
I think it's terrible that we're doing it in India. We don't need to. Every new trend that came from Europe, nouvelle cuisine, it started with trying to understand flavors and starting to eat less. So it came from a principle of health, of presentation, and so on. So everything was small. The produce was very important. The provenance was very important, which farm. Then it became ridiculous, Then people used it to make money and make a name for themselves. And there was that famous joke, waiter, I've ordered a piece of beef or a steak, I can't see it. And the waiter says, push over the pea, it's underneath. So, that it was those kind of jokes that came about nouvelle cuisine. Then molecular came, which was actually based in science.
Okay.
And it was two physicists that started this whole thing of changing textures, changing the form in which food was served, concentrating flavors. Now, if your meat and your vegetable have flavors, why do you need to do that?
And why is that?
To me, it's because produce in Europe is getting worse. And you have to spend a lot of money to get really good produce. The provenance and so on. It's double the amount if you buy an organic piece of meat or an organic vegetable. Not quite double, but almost, to a normal. It's certainly not something you would do every week for a family. So when you start having not very good produce, you start flavoring it more. But to answer your question, I think this whole molecular thing is a waste of time. I think, like Nouvelle Cuisine, there was a reason it was started, and it was a fun reason. I like the idea of concentrating flavors. Abhijit Saha in his restaurant Caperberry, when it first opened, I don't know if you remember, he did what was it? Not a gazpacho, something which segregated the flavors. It was something with, was it a gazpacho? I can't remember. But it was something in a sphere and something else in a square. And it was quite a delicious idea of getting everything in one mouthful.
We had dinner together there, remember?
We did, absolutely. Do you remember what that dish was?
Not really.
It was something with mozzarella and tomato and something, and it was a sphere of tomato water, and then there was something else in a square. I can't remember. It was quite delicious.
Well, let's ask him. So, Abhijit, if you're listening to this, why don't you call us back on the show and tell us what it was?
What it was.
Right.
It was delicious.
It was.
But it's the kind of thing you do when you go out and you have an experience.
Right.
You're sitting with Ramji and having dinner and you want to do something fun. But it's not the kind of place you would go on a Saturday night necessarily. Is that him? No.
Not necessarily. But this does indeed bring me to the angst I have with Indian food
Trends.
that you get in restaurants and so on. Why is Indian food generally a larger subset of masala and carbs? As you can tell, I'm not exactly a foodie, so you'll have to bear with this rather basic question.
Tandoori chicken.
Exactly. So why is this? Is it just because it's more convenient or cheaper?
Yes. It's cheaper. It's easier. It's like Italian food. People say, oh, it's all about pizza and pasta. It's not really, but pizza and pasta is cheap.
So if everything in Indian food has to be either too spicy or cloying sweet, it means that we don't really have a subtle and discerning palate. And yet there are people like you and other foodies. So tell me, where are all these Indians who would appreciate all the stuff that you've been saying? Discerning palate.
Interesting. I think there's two questions here. One is a younger generation. I think the younger generation love tasty food. They love anything that tastes good. They're not cooking, so they don't know what goes inside. They just love tasty, quick foods with texture. Fried. They love fried.
Guilty.
So anything fried and rice and carby and quick. I mean, how many people lay a table and sit down anymore? Most people graze.
So true.
I have kids in their early 30s. One of them entertains a lot. And they sit at a table, but when they have their friends over, they lay a buffet and everybody grazes. So I think that's one side of it.
Okay.
And the other side, as I said about produce, produce is expensive. And if you're doing a fillet of fish or just vegetables with a little tadka, it's not sexy. It's not sexy food. It's something it's very gharka, it's very home style.
I get it.
And I think it's not appealing. The young person likes to be entertained, and that's part of this whole appeal of this kind of 25 dishes on a buffet.
Then isn't it frustrating for all these great chefs in India to be cooking to an audience of, you can count them?
At the end of the day, yeah. I know it's sad, but I think India is a big country. I hold out a lot of hope. I think India is a big country. There are chefs now that are doing some wonderful things with local products. There are several chefs, not 200, but I would say there's 10 or 12 of them that I know. So I think there's always going to be a market for the good stuff. But mass market is obviously growing. And as I said, for two reasons. One, it's cheaper. And secondly, our taste buds have changed. Younger people like punchy food.
Multi-cuisine, all flavors, all at once.
And variety is another problem I have. Why do you have to have 20 dishes on a buffet?
Value for money?
We have to evolve. I think we have to evolve in terms of cuisine.
I dare say. And one of the people helping in this evolution is you. Let's get to your book.
Okay.
Your book is titled Masala Memsahib. It's subtitled Recipes and Stories from My Culinary Adventures in India. Lovely book. As I said before, stories, photographs, recipes, great production values. And there's some pictures of you, autobiographical photographs, if you like. And you always looked hot, didn't you?
How sweet you are. Yeah, I put them there to remind me.
Oh, just look in the mirror, love. And this book is your journey, your discovery. And one thing comes through very clearly in your book. It's not food and culture, is it? It's food is culture.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think food is culture. It's you can trace food like you can with fashion. Our roots. Let's get back to what our grandmothers, forget mothers, because a lot of mothers don't cook. But I find this cooking nowadays is, maids come in, they cook quickly, they run away.
Right.
They're not cooking with heart.
Okay.
They're just cooking quickly,
It's a job.
It's a job. And if we can take over some of that and make cooking exciting, sexy, bring in your family, bring in the kids to help. With food, it's a little bit more tactile. It's about smell and touch and going to a market, meeting the vendor, and a bit of experience. And I want, now in this phase of my life, I want to make all of that sexy and exciting so that people get back to it.
And the result is this beautiful book.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
something of your vision, and it's important to you.
For me, it was important, and luckily, I'm very, very, very fortunate to have had Tista Macmillan, who had the same vision. She also said, I'm looking forward. COVID is going to finish. Let's bring out a beautiful book. Let's bring out a book with so many color pages, with lots of introduction, with a visual of introduction. And she completely rode on this journey with me. And I think that is really my biggest gift in this book.
That's wonderful. And how's the book doing so far? It's selling well, I bet.
Yeah, it is. And the good news is, and they may go for a reprint about February.
Fantastic. Let's nudge that along now.
Absolutely.
For our listeners, there's a link in the podcast description to where you can buy a copy of Masala Memsahib and every other book that Karen Anand has written. And she has written quite a lot.
Thank you.
And considering that you're only in the middle of your already eventful career, I do look forward to everything else that you're going to be doing. And on that note, Karen Anand, thank you so much for being my guest today on The Literary City.
Thank you so much, Ramji. It's been wonderful talking to you.
And stay tuned. In the next segment, I'm going to have Abhijit Saha tell us what he served us that day. Bye till then.
Thanks. Bye.
And that was author, TV personality, and food expert, the fabulous Karen Anand. And I will be back with What's That Word? That fun segment where we look at words and phrases that we use all the time, but never stop to think about. Right after this. And I'm back with What's That Word? And here is my co-host.
Hello, my name is Praniti, but you can call me P. That's P with an A, not another E.
And hello, P with an A and not a fluid E. Today's episode was all about food, right? What did you have for dinner?
I'll tell you what I did not have for dinner. A gazpacho is what. And another thing.
What?
In the interview with Karen Anand, but hey, that was such a great fun interview, by the way. She's so funny.
She is, isn't she? But thank you.
So, in the interview, Karen kept talking about the dinner you guys had at Caperberry and the dish that you were served by Chef Abhijit Saha.
Yes, I can't remember what it was, though.
Right, you did say, but it sounded like a salad to me, Mozzarella, tomato, was it?
Well, you ought to know. You went to hospitality college, didn't you?
Yes.
A good and reputable one.
The best.
Which one?
The Welcome Group Graduate School of Hotel Administration in Manipal.
Wow, that's quite a mouthful, no pun intended. All right. But isn't that where they teach you to make omelets?
You like saying that in meetings to embarrass me, but I refuse to buckle. And yes, I can turn an omelette.
Well, personally, I don't turn an omelette. I let it cook just on the one side.
Hey, that's not fair. You can't go twisting my words. What will the entire industry think of me now?
This is a literary show. It's called What's That Word? Our motto is We Twist Words.
And I shout.
Twist and shout. Good one.
Say, back to the dish Karen talked about. You said you'd ask Abhijit Saha.
I did, and I will.
Why not do it right now?
Oh, sure. Why not? Okay. Will you go ahead and call him? Get him on the line?
Yeah. Ramji, I have Abhijit on the line.
Thank you, P. Hello, Abhijit.
Hi Ramji, how are you? Good to hear from you.
Yeah, I'm very well. So everything going on well for the season? You must be pretty busy now, right?
Yes, it's Christmas is around the corner and there's so much happening. So, of course, life is busy.
Wonderful, wonderful. Hey, listen, this is just a quick call. On my podcast, The Literary City, I was interviewing our mutual good friend, Karen Anand. So tell me, you have to put us out of our misery because I told Karen I would call and get this information with you. So tell us what was that dish?
It's really wonderful that Karen remembers the dish, though she doesn't remember the name. So I will let you know that. So it is the dish that Karen is talking about is basically New Age salad caprese. So in Caperberry, we did, yes, in Caperberry, we did multiple dishes where we would, break the elements and present them in a different format where you would get the classic dish in a different interpretation. So we had renditions, we had deconstructions, we had new age. So this dish is basically the salad caprese. Salad caprese, as you know, is a classic Italian salad which is made from tomato, fresh mozzarella. Then there is olive oil, then there is basil, and then there is, of course, balsamic vinegar. Sometimes we do add that as well. So for the new age salad caprese we served at Caperberry, what we had done is we had created spherifications with the mozzarella cheese. So it burst with flavor in your mouth. Then we had the sorbet, which was made from tomato and basil. And we had the balsamic reduction, which was made into a jelly. So these were the things, and we served it with arugula. And when you ate it together, it almost reminded you of the original salad caprese, but presented completely differently. And of course, giving you a complete new experience.
Well, that's fantastic. I had no idea that I was a participant in an experience of this subliminal.
Thank you.
You're more than welcome. Pranati, you had a question.
Yes, so Karen mentioned tomato water. Was that the sorbet? I was wondering what tomato water was.
Yeah, basically tomato water is a part of other dishes that we did, but it was not a part of this dish. This was the tomato basil sorbet she was talking about. So, which obviously melted in your mouth as water. Yeah.
Sounds delicious.
Wow. Cool. Well, I'm going to be happy. Karen should get it. So there it is. So thank you so much, Abhijit. We hope we didn't take too much of your time in the midst of your season's doings.
No, it is always a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for having me over.
Thanks, Abhijit. See you. Bye.
Bye, Ramji.
Bye, Abhijit.
Bye, Praniti. Bye.
All right, Karen. There's your answer. I did think it was a salad.
Yes, you did say it was. All right, P with an A. What's that word?
So in the interview, you used the phrase chercher la femme.
Yes, I did. It was the familiar form, cherche la femme. I did use it, I admit, a little sheepishly, though.
Okay. I have heard the expression, and I know the literal translation from French is find the woman.
Yes, it is. Say, where did you learn French again?
Duolingo.
Duolingo, the lockdown companion.
And post-lockdown, I'm still at it.
Good.
Okay, the etymology of cherche la femme, and what context did it have the way you used it with Karen? And why did you say you feel sheepish using that phrase?
Okay, while the literal translation is find the woman, the metaphorical use is somewhat un-PC.
Oh, good. I like satire. So, dish.
Okay, so the meaning is whenever a man gets into trouble for doing whatever wrong he did or behaving badly or unusually or just like a stupid guy, the phrase to explain his motives is chercher la femme, meaning that if you really want to know what happened and what's the reason for someone behaving badly or committing a crime, usually a woman is the reason for it.
I'm not sure about being un-PC about this now.
Why am I not surprised? Well, why should you be? It's the men that come across as stupid and being a doofus, right?
Hashtag redundancy alert.
Now that was on PC.
No, that was satirical.
Okay, fair enough. You win.
Yes. Now the origins, please.
Right. Now, in Alexandre Dumas' Les Mohicans de Paris, which he wrote in 1864, well, actually, in the 1878 English translation of that same novel, the detective, the protagonist, decides that there must be a woman involved in the crime being investigated. So, cherchons la femme, he declares, which means let's find the woman. Later, a colleague confirmed his suspicions. Ah, Monsieur Jacol, you were right when you said find the woman.
Hilarious.
Well, and the phrase came into popular use soon afterwards, and it crossed the Atlantic only in 1909. And O. Henry used it to title a story. The story title was Cherchez la femme. And the story had this line in it. Ah, yes, I know most times when those men lose money, you say cherchez la femme. There is somewhere the woman.
Wow, we are so powerful.
Do you want to know how powerful?
Yes, please.
So Alexandre Dumas, who also wrote The Count of Monte Cristo, right? So he followed in the Count's footsteps. He spent all his money on trying to attract women by living the high life in his Chateau de Monte Cristo and everything. See?
I can see where this is headed.
Exactly. And when Alexandre Dumas biographers need to find out what had become of his fortune, they only need to
Cherchez la femme.
You got it.
Serves him right. This is all too funny.
Hey, and there's a modern version of that expression. And that expression is follow the money, right? You've heard that.
Yes.
So it means the same thing, but follow the money doesn't exactly blame the man for being a doofus about a chick.
I knew nothing about all of this before. Well, that was so entertaining. And as for me, no one is going to have any luck cherching this farm tonight. Bye.
And that is our show. I would like to thank my guests, Karen Anand, Abhijit Saha, and my co-host, Pranati P. with an A. Madhav. And you for being here and for listening and for doing so wonderfully for us right through season 2. And we will see you back here in the new year with a great season 3 lineup. Now, before you go, remember to hit that subscribe button if you haven't done it already, so you never miss an episode of the wonderful season 3 that we have planned for you. So have a great Christmas, New Year's, Kwanzaa, whatever it is you celebrate. There's Festivus for the rest of us. See you next year. Bye.